Capture the flag.
Hello, Forerunner Conflict. This is KazuhLLL, and I'm here bringing you a bit of a commentary on improving yourself as a player. It's a topic that's been done to death, I know, but I feel like a lot of times it's just not done well enough, and especially it's not done well enough for the people who need it. Like, so many of the videos on improving your game just don't go into enough detail, and in my opinion, the lower and mid-skilled players need that detail in order to actually change anything about how they play the game. Now, I'm going to go ahead and narrow down improving as a player into 3 different categories. First one is staying alive, the second one is calling out, and the third one is playing smart as a teammate. Now, all the time, when somebody asks for help, they'll get responses like, oh, just don't die as often. And that really doesn't help too many people out, not, at least in my opinion, it doesn't, because staying alive comes down to lots of, second-by-second judgment calls. And those, some people kind of intuitively will pick up a first-person shooter and, make the judgments correctly, but most people really won't. And without any details, they won't really know what they're doing wrong. You could tell them not to die, but they won't know what they have to change in order for them not to die. And really, everything I'm going to talk about comes down to how smart you play the game. And really, that's the most important thing. With staying alive and surviving, unless you're an epic 4-shot every time you get in a 1v1 and hit every no-scope with the sniper rifle, you should keep in mind the mantra, live to fight another day. A lot of people, when they try to give tips on how somebody can stay alive, they will just say, oh, if you're in a 1v1 and you're losing, run away. And I think that's awful advice, because if they don't have the knowledge of how to make those judgments from a more global scale of their gameplay, you can't really expect them to know how to make the judgments like that on a second-by-second basis. So really, I think with how to approach a 1v1 situation, I think it should actually be the other way around. You shouldn't go into a battle assuming that you're going to win and then try to figure out if you need to run away while you're battling. You should go in assuming you have to run away, and if you end up, getting the upper hand and knowing that you can win, it's much easier to figure that out and stay in the battle than to figure it out and try to have time to run away. And so really, I think just something as simple as changing how you approach a 1v1 scenario can create big improvements in a lot of people. As far as actually running away effectively, that's kind of a topic of its own, because I'm sure everyone here has played somebody that's clearly better than them, and I'm sure most of you have played the people that are you could beat in a 1v1, but they just keep getting away, and they're the most frustrating people to play when you play Halo, at least for me anyway. And really, that's not from any sort of luck of their own, it's because they're running away in a very intelligent fashion. And learning how to do so involves learning the lines of sight on the maps. Basically, most people will run away, they'll take the shortest possible distance between cover to cover, and they'll try to just bolt in a straight line. And that sometimes works, but it sometimes doesn't, and it's really just down to chance. And if you want to get better as a player, your goal should be to eliminate any form of chance that you can. By knowing the lines of sight on the map, you can, a lot of times you'll see that there's a better way to run away that's not the most direct and obvious way. A concrete example of that is on Abandon. If you're on main ramp and you're running up it to ring 3 and you're getting shot from behind, most people will just keep running to ring 3 and hope they make it. But you really shouldn't leave anything to hope in this game. Don't let your opponents set the pace for you and set, the circumstances for you. You're supposed to create those circumstances yourself, or else you're going to find yourself losing a lot. So in that example on Abandon, a smarter way of running away would be to simply drop down off of main ramp, because from on top of main ramp, almost the entire beach side of the map can shoot you, and you're very likely to die. There are so many lines of sight that can shoot you. But if you just drop down, you eliminate more than half of the lines of sight, and really it doesn't take too much longer to just drop down and lift back up ring 3 than it does to just run to ring 3 itself. So an example like that is one of how you can, just by thinking things through more effectively, how you can die less. And doing something like that like, of course it helps, in any game, but it absolutely shines in, like, no radar settings, because the more unpredictable you are, the less likely the opponents will be to know your lines of sight, and so they won't know whether they're hiding or whether you can see them perfectly, and they'll have a much harder time running away from you if when you're running away you're very unpredictable. Now, my second point, it would be to just calling out. If you in any way want to improve as a player, it's absolutely a necessity learning at least basic callouts. Like, don't learn a callout for absolutely every square inch of the map, but at least the general, like, 4 directions, like mid, and then have callouts for one direction, like north, south, east, west. If you can at least, like, kind of divide the map into sort of quadrants, and at least impress upon your teammates what side of the map the other team's on, then that by itself will really just help a lot. Like on Haven, there's open ramp, there's open side, closed side, which is also Mohawk, and then there's red and blue. If you're getting shot from somewhere, just, even if you don't know where, and if you don't know the callout, just say generally from red side, I'm getting shot from red side. Even if it's not the most accurate callout, at least your teammates will know to look in that direction, and they'll probably see them themselves. And a big thing that I see with a lot of low to medium level players is their favorite callout is always on my X, and that's an awful callout. Like, not only does your X not really stay long enough for you to know where it is, but it's very hard to, like, judge the distance of where exactly you died unless, like, your teammate's right next to you. And if your teammate's right next to you, then he should have helped you kill the person who killed you to begin with. And so it's really hard to exactly know where your X is, especially since your teammates are probably in the middle of shooting somebody else, and for them to see your X before it, like, goes away and you respawn, they pretty much have to immediately stop and look and, like, try to find your X. And it's really just a terrible callout to use, and there's really no excuse for using it, because if, like I said before, if you're going into a situation assuming you're going to have to run away, then basically you should never kind of play out a 1v1 to the point of you dying. Like, if you play out a 1v1, it should only be because you're absolutely positive you're going to win. If you're even, like, the slightest bit unsure, just give the shot or two on them and run away. But even if, like, you get trapped and you can't run away and there's absolutely nothing you can do and you know for sure you're going to die, your callout shouldn't be on my X, because you should make a point to have called them out the instant you saw them. The instant you saw them, the instant you started shooting at them. Like, if you lift up top mid on Haven or something, don't try to 1v1 them because you have to, because there's no way of you getting away, and then call out on my X. As you lift up and as you see them, say top mid, and then, like, that will give your teammates a higher likelihood of being able to look top mid and help you out. Because the biggest thing about playing well in this game is having teammates that are playing well with you. Even, like, the best of players can be put on a terrible team and do terrible because they had no help. But that brings me to my last point, and that's playing your role as a teammate. People like to say, like to set roles for teams, like, oh, main slayer, objective player, and support player. But really, every single person in a game should be a support player. Every single one, no matter what. And there are a few basic things that you could do to be a support player, and a lot of that kind of pulls from what I've already said. You know, if you stay alive but you don't call out, then you're not going to be a support player. If you call out but you don't stay alive, you're not going to be a support player. But if you do both in conjunction, you're going to get a lot of assists, like a massive amount of assists. Because if you call out somebody the instant you see them, and then you get 1 or 2 shots on them, and then you stay alive and you run away, then by the time that they, like, you know, they chase after you, or they might just stand there waiting for you to poke your head back out, your teammates can be getting shots on them and finish them off, and you're going to find yourself running into a lot of assists that way. But you have to do both. You have to stay alive and call out, and you have to do them both correctly. So as far as being a good teammate and using your teammates the way they should be used, also harkens back to the lines of sight that I covered. When people talk about playing as a team, probably the most basic thing is, oh, just stick with somebody, stick together with somebody. And that's a good stepping stone for learning teamwork, but it's not the best, like, way of showing teamwork. Because if you're sticking together with somebody, if you happen across a person from the other team, you and your teammate have the same exact line of sight on them, and it's much easier for that person to get away. But if instead of sticking right next to somebody, you sort of, like, you get maybe the first shot off from, like, that same point, you should immediately try to imagine how they will run away. Like, while your teammate keeps putting fire on them, you should be moving to block at least one path that they can run away from. Even if they run the other way, that's fine. At least you'll have kind of extended your team's total lines of sight on the map. The last way of playing the role of a good teammate goes is calling out when you pick up power weapons and when you pick up, like, overshield or something. And even further, if you aren't the one to pick it up, but you see your teammate pick it up, or you see an enemy pick it up, if nobody calls it out, you make sure you note the time and call it out, because 2 or 3 minutes when that weapon respawns, it could, like, make the difference between a win and a loss. And part of being a good team is making sure that the rest of your teammates are playing as a team. And you can have it fall on the squad leader, the fire team leader, or whatever, but really just, it doesn't have to be limited to that. Like, if you are playing conscious to, like, what the team needs to do to succeed, and you see that somebody else isn't playing that way, call them out on it. Like, I've been on a lot of teams, and a lot of times when you're facing your opponent and they're just completely just outplaying you and get an early lead or whatever, a lot of times, like, so many people will just stop calling out. And if no one, like, points out to them that they're not calling out anymore, they're probably not going to call out for, like, the rest of the game. And it's probably going to be a pretty frustrating game, and if it's frustrating for them, they're not going to be very good players. But if you just, like, if one of your teammates isn't calling out, be like, hey, WM feedback, you're not calling out, you should totally call out, because that would be very helpful. I mean, don't be an asshole about it, but pointing out what they're doing when they do it, I mean, it'll help your team improve, and it'll help them improve as players, because you're basically giving them a live critique of their game, and they can see, like, as they play what they're doing wrong, and they can adjust to it in real time. And really, if you just can keep your team focused on, getting the win, like, just little things like that, they all add up. You can't just stay alive, you can't just call out, and you can't just attempt to be a supporting role by yourself. You have to do all three at the same time, and you have to make sure your teammates are doing it at the same time. I mean, I'm not going to call any names or anything, but there are plenty of people who I know are good players, but they're not very good teammates because they just, like, are too focused on staying alive and not helping out. And staying alive is great, but if they're staying alive and not calling out and communicating with their team, most of the people that they're running away from are going to be full shields by the time the rest of their teammates encounter them. And they probably won't know where they're going to encounter them because the guy didn't call them out to begin with. It's a very vicious circle, but it's one that you have to be aware of and be focused on avoiding if you're going to improve your game at all. Like, at the start of Halo 4, I had a, like, 1.2, 1.3 KD in matchmaking, and I was pretty consistently at that range. And then I started getting back into, like, watching the competitive scene, and I started realizing all the things I was doing wrong. And, like, even though I had already gotten, like, 10,000, 15,000 kills on my service records, so my KD was pretty locked in the last 2 months, it's gone from, like, a 1.3 to a 1.55 or something. And that's with having lots of kills on it and stuff. So you can definitely see some pretty significant improvements if you're just focusing on the right things. And I know a lot of people don't really care about improving, and if you're in a squad that doesn't really care about improving, but you do, then you should talk to your squad leader, and you should ask to either, like, have the fire teams rearranged so that all the people who want to just screw around and have fun can do that, and all the people who want to, like, focus and try to get the win can do that too. Or, I mean, if you feel that strongly about it, you can even request a squad transfer. I mean, obviously, don't do that so lightly, but anyway, if you're staying alive and you're calling out and you're playing well as a teammate and you still feel that you could be better, then, I mean, like, send me your gameplays if you want, and I will tell you what I think you're doing wrong and what I think you could do better. But honestly, I don't really see anybody who's doing all three of those things will not be a good player. I mean, obviously, like, individual skill and, like, the reflexes and stuff has a lot to do with how good of a player you are. But with intelligence alone and playing smart by itself, every single person in this community has the potential to be at least above, like, the average matchmaking players. And so, yeah, I know this video is probably going to be very long. I won't know until I edit it, but hopefully some of you have gotten through this, and hopefully I made sense, and I've never done a video or anything like this before, so I have no idea if it's going to be good or not. But let me know. And if you want to hear more things like this in the future, let me know that too. If you want me to never make a video again, tell me that, and I might not. But yeah, anyway, thanks for listening, and I will see you later.